This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Love and War, Part 12. When we left off, Donovan had done what Donovan does. No, he didn't whoop anybody's behind or cuss anybody out. He just used that supersonic genius mind of his to draw some pretty spot-on conclusions. And with very little fanfare, he went home and had a crucial conversation with his Lord and Savior. And waiting for him was the Queen Mother. When he told her the three main pieces of information that he'd gathered: one, that Jeff was not his brother; two, that Maribel and Jeff were not in a relationship; and three, that Jeff knew exactly who Maribel was when he showed up at the hospital, the Queen Mother said, "I'm sure you have good reason to have drawn those conclusions, but you're going to have to convince me. Otherwise, I'm starting the process to have you IVC'd again, because you sound crazy as hell." When Donovan told the Queen Mother that Jeff had met many years before and that he knew that he had a daughter named Maribel who worked at the hospital in Dallas, and that he had to have known that Maribel was connected to the family and she'd be a way for him to meet them, the Queen Mother said, "And he told you all of this?" Donovan said, "He told me without telling me." The Queen Mother said, "Well, I'll find out for sure myself. But that doesn't change the fact that he didn't find out that you and Maribel were an item until today." Donovan said, "Did he tell you that?" The Queen Mother said, "He told us all that." Donovan said, "He's a liar. He didn't tell you that I confronted him at the hospital the day after he showed up with Maribel to do the lesson for the children?" The Queen Mother said, "No, he never mentioned it." Donovan said, "I get that you trust him with your life because he saved it, but I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. And if he keep playing, I'm going to find out just how far I can throw him. He is not who he says he is, and he definitely isn't my father's son." The Queen Mother said, "Nigel did a DNA test and it proved," Donovan said, "it proved that they were related, but that he wasn't Jeff's father. It didn't prove who his father was. The man is in his late 40s. When he was 4 years old, a DNA test couldn't have proven exactly how closely related they were. That technology wasn't even around back then." The Queen Mother realized that Donovan was right, but she said, "Well, Andy and Nigel didn't have any other brothers or even any cousins who could have possibly been Jeff's father. Look, I understand that you want Maribel, but denying that Jeff is your brother is not the way to get her back, son. And Manny told you to leave his daughter alone." Donovan said, "He also told me that he doesn't want his daughter with a man in the life." Queen Mother said, "So what you think you gonna do, son? You gonna prove that he had an ulterior motive and that's gonna get Maribel off him?" Donovan said, "She not on him." The Queen Mother said, "Did she tell you that?" Donovan said, "She told me without having to tell me." Queen Mother said, "Are you taking your medication? Are you talking to your therapist?" Donovan said, "Medea, my mind is clear and so is my heart." The Queen Mother said, "Do you have any idea who might be behind the attack on Maribel? Because that's where our focus should be." Donovan said, "Have you asked Jeff that? Maybe you should ask the woman that he's over there entertaining at the estate, because he had company when I stopped by." The man came to the door wrapped in a towel. He had that mid-sex sheen all over his body and fresh scratches on his back. The Queen Mother said, "Well, I guess the jig is up. You know now. He and Maribel are not together. So what are you going to do, son?" Donovan said, "I'm going to prove that he's not my brother. And then I'm going to stop trying to prove myself to Maribel, to you, to this family. It's time I focus my energy on what God wants and what my children need. Now, I'd never put you out of my house, but the same way you saw yourself in, you could see yourself out." The Queen Mother said, "Well, excuse the hell out of me. Let me tell you something, son. You've asked me more than once about how I handled your Aunt Gera. And I told you today that I dispatched of her expeditiously. But let me tell you why. Why I didn't draw it out and make her suffer. Why I didn't seek revenge and make it sweet. Not just because Samuel didn't want me to. And not just because she's my sister, but because I'd found peace I'd made peace with everything that she'd done and everything that I'd been through. I made peace with burying your father. I made peace with the things that I suffered at the hands of the Ramirez family and losing your brother Chance, knowing that it was because of your Aunt Gera. And I could have given her what I gave to JR and worse. But I had to be a demonstration for Salima, Stephanie, Jeffrey, and True. And most importantly, for you. I had to demonstrate that you can solve a problem with mercy and grace. It's the same reason why I allowed every one of Santiago's children to live. I can't say that God is pleased with me taking lives, but when it's my turn to face him, I want to be able to stand on every decision I made. Make sure you can do the same. Then she left Donovan's house and headed over to the estate. When she got to Jeff's door, she banged on it. It took him a minute to answer the door. And when he did, he was wrapped in a towel. Meanwhile, over at the estate in Denton, Regina's sitting in the mudroom when LJ walks through the garage door. When he flips on the light, his heart almost jumps out of his chest. He said, "Gigi, what you doing?" Regina said, "Where you been, LJ?" LJ said, "I was with Q." Regina said, "You might want to rethink that. You know I have your location." LJ said, "Then you know that I was at the Salvation Center of Dallas." Regina said, "No. Your phone was at the Salvation Center of Dallas. Q was at a meeting. And unless you was sitting on his damn lap, you were not at the Salvation Center of Dallas." When the family meeting was over, Regina let Mom Joyce take the children back to her house and put them to bed. She went with Angela to help her put her children to bed. She knew that Melissa was going to need some special attention, and Angela was going to want some one-on-one time with her baby girl. She'd asked Angela for her cell phone, and then she immediately went to Q's location. Angela wasn't the type of wife who checked her husband's location on any kind of regular basis. She darn near had forgotten that she even had the ability to check his location, so she had no idea where Q even was. But Regina was cut from a different cloth. She didn't play with LJ. And after that whole situation with Agent Nisha Russian, she was looking at him sideways. Yeah, she'd forgiven him, and she'd accepted the version of the story that they both told because it lined up with L3's. But her mind told her that her husband was up to no good. She was determined to get to the bikini bottom of things. She hadn't seen hair nor hide of the old LJ, the one that she knew in high school and in college. But she also knew that people could change and people could change. And as of late, LJ had had way too many complaints. Everything she did seemed to get on his nerves. The only reason that she went to his office that day to discuss their personal problems is because he'd been avoiding discussing them whenever they were at home together. And he was very rarely at home. So when she looked at Q's location on Angela's phone and LJ's location on her phone, and she looked up events at the Salvation Center of Dallas, she realized that there was an AA meeting there and that both phones were in the meeting room where the AA meeting was being held. It was reasonable that LJ would take Q to the AA meeting, but it was not reasonable that LJ would be in the meeting with him. That's not how AA worked. While Q would have been discussing personal things with the group, he wouldn't have wanted to discuss them with anybody in his personal life present. So in the mudroom, LJ said, "Baby, it's not what you think." And Regina said, "Whenever the hell somebody says it's not what you think, it's worse than what you think. Get to talking, nigga." Meanwhile, at the estate in Dallas, Texas, the Queen Mother just finished questioning Jeff. He'd admitted to meeting Manny several years before he even knew that Andy was his father. He also admitted to overhearing a conversation between Manny and Nigel, where Manny was telling Nigel to take his wife, who was having female issues, to Dallas to see his daughter, Maribel. He heard Manny say that Maribel had privileges at the hospital where Angela was a patient. And only a few months after that, Nigel told him that Andy was his father And then he told him about Andy's family and that Q was married to a woman named Angela who was pregnant. And he put two and two together and realized that Angela was the niece who Manny had referenced, and Maribel was the daughter who worked at the hospital in Dallas. The Queen Mother said, "You've made a huge mistake. First of all, you playing with Donovan, and he is not the one you want to play with. Second, you lied to all of us. Why?" Jeff said, I wasn't trying to lie. I'd agreed not to try make contact with the family without Uncle Nigel. And it seemed like the perfect way to get introduced to you all as somebody other than my father's son. But I actually liked Maribel. She and I worked together for a while before I even approached her like that. The Queen Mother said, "But you pretended like you had no idea that Maribel had been in a relationship with Donovan." Jeff said, "That's because I didn't. He confronted me after I went to the cabin outside Fort Worth to try to do that lesson for the children, and he didn't say anything about being in a relationship with her. And Maribel never said that he reacted so strongly because he was her ex. He said that they didn't do outsiders. I thought that he was upset because she'd brought somebody that he didn't know. I thought their relationship was like brother and sister. I thought that their closeness was because Angela was married to Q. You've got to understand, I grew up in a different world. In my world, family friends are more like relatives, and I would never date the daughter of one of the Thomas's friends, and they weren't even my biological parents. I thought Donovan and Maribel grew up together, didn't they?" Queen Mother said, "No, they didn't. They hadn't seen one another in decades. They didn't even realize that they knew one another." Jeff said, "Well, I misread that whole situation. I wouldn't lie to you. Not intentionally. Well, I'm not trying to deceive you here. I'm putting it all on the line. I knew that she had a relationship with you all, but I did not know that she had a romantic relationship with Donovan. And she ended things with me almost immediately after that anyway." The Queen Mother asked, "Well, why when he came here to ask you questions, why didn't you just tell him the truth? Or tell him nothing and let Maribel handle it like she asked you to?" He said, "I tried, but he showed up shortly after I hung up the phone with her. I didn't even have time to get my story straight. And then he started asking me questions I wasn't prepared for. And to make things worse, I'm in love with her. I understand that Manny isn't going to approve of her being in a relationship with someone in her life. And I know she doesn't love me too. But Donovan's demeanor made it real hard for me to stand down." The Queen Mother said, "Well, you need to. You need to be focused on building a relationship with your siblings, replacing Nigel as the head of the St. James family, and not putting Maribel smack dab in the middle of a war between you and Donovan, because Manny will not be pleased, and neither will I. Donovan has his mind made up that you're not my Andy's son. And when my Andy died, they took a blood card. Are you willing?" And before she could ask if he'd be willing to take another DNA test using the blood card, she heard a noise coming from inside the apartment. She said, "Never mind. We'll discuss this more tomorrow." And when he turned his back, she saw, or didn't see, what she knew Donovan seen too. Meanwhile, at Maribel's estate, Emmanuel Lopez was on the scene. You had to know that while he was willing to allow Stephanie to run the investigation into her attack, he was going to lay eyes on his baby girl for himself to make sure that she was okay. And he was comforting his daughter in the sitting room where she was crying her heart out. Manny said, "Mija, you got to talk to me. I have no problem with sitting here and holding you while you cry all night. But I need to know what exactly you crying about. Because if I got to kill a nigga, I'll kill a nigga." Maribel said, "Papi, if I give him another chance, how do I know that he's not going to do something else to prove that that's the wrong choice? But how do I stay here knowing that I can't avoid seeing him and move on with my life?" I had no idea who Jeff was, and I tried really, really hard to just move on. He showed himself to be a perfect gentleman, everything that I could have ever wanted in a man. But he wasn't Donovan. I'm gonna spend the rest of my life comparing every man to Donovan. And even if I meet a man who's all the things that he isn't, he'll never be all the things that he is. And Manny said, Mia, if you done with him, then you done with him. And I'ma stand on that. At this point, I'd prefer if you just find another man. But I've always kept it real with you. And I'm not gonna stop now. You will find another man. But if you truly love Donovan, and this isn't about wanting what you can't have, then no matter how you feel about that new man, you won't ever stop loving Donovan. And you can absolutely build a life with someone else. But that man will always be living in Donovan's shadow. And the faults and flaws that you see in Donovan are absolutely things that God can change. Since he's been home, I've had a lot of interactions with him. He's been working with me on some legitimate business. And we've been discussing a lot of things other than you. He's a man on a mission to rebuild his life and live in his purpose. And the way he handled this situation today should be proof that while he still may have a ways to go, he's come a long way. So you can go out there and find the 20%, but all you'll have is 20%. If you're unfamiliar with the 80-20 rule, let me school you. If you have someone who's 80% of what you want, and the 20% you're not quite sure that you can live without, and you find someone else, they may very well be everything that that first person isn't. But in the long run, all they will be is that 20%. So Manny said, Donovan isn't a perfect man. Neither am I. And he's made a lot of mistakes. So have I. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you forgiven me for the mistakes that I made when you were a child? Maribel said, of course. You've made up for them tenfold. But even if you didn't, I forgave you a long time ago, Daddy. Manny said, thank you. Do you love me despite my faults and my flaws? Maribel said, of course, because you are constantly evolving and working on who you are. If you could forgive and love me, and I was certainly worse than Donovan is right now, then perhaps you can forgive him and allow yourself to love him too. Meanwhile, at Donovan's, he's standing in the shower and letting the water run down his face and wash his tears away. He just finished saying to God, Lord, this is my last prayer about this topic. I'm hanging on to a thread, and all I have left is this prayer. I don't know what you planned for me and Maribel, but I'm leaving it in your hands.
I'm hanging on by a thread, and all I'm clinging to is prayers. And every breath is like a battle. I feel like I ain't come prepared.